coin drops with a heavy hollow click. Shivering, bleeding from a gash above one eyebrow, she clutches a greasy payphone receiver like a lifeline. "I have nowhere to go," she whispers into plastic. 20 minutes later, the street shakes. 10 black SUVs box in the block. The rain in this city never washed away the grime. It only made it slicker. Maya kept her head down her chin, tucked into the collar of a cheap canvas jacket that had stopped repelling water an hour ago. The downpour was absolute, a sheet of grey noise that drowned out the sirens wailing a few districts over. Her right shoe was missing, its heel snapped off 3 blocks back when she scrambled over a rusted chain-link fence to lose the men trailing her from the shipyard. She tasted copper. She tasted ozone. Her breaths came in ragged, burning gasps that scraped the back of her throat, but she didn't stop moving. She couldn't. If she stopped, the adrenaline would crash, and her legs would give out. If she stopped, the men who had just put 2 bullets into the chest of her informant would find her. Up ahead, a flickering neon sign fought a losing battle against the dark. A closed bodega. Beside it, standing like an obsolete relic of a bygone era, was a payphone. Maya limped toward it. The concrete was unforgiving beneath her bare heel. She practically collapsed into the small 3-sided enclosure, the plastic shielding offering a pathetic illusion of safety. Her hands shook violently as she reached into her denim pocket. Her fingers, dark and bruised, scrambled against lint and a crumpled receipt before brushing the cold, serrated edge of a quarter. She pulled it out. 1 coin. She stared at the graffiti-covered metal box. The police were out of the question. The badges in this precinct were bought and paid for by the same men currently hunting her. Her sister was 3 states away, pregnant and safe. Calling her meant dragging a monster to her doorstep. Her friends were civilians. They wouldn't know what to do with a bleeding woman and a cartel hit squad. There was only one number. A number she had memorized 2 years ago and sworn to God she would never dial. Maya shoved the quarter into the slot. It dropped with a heavy mechanical clunk. She lifted the receiver. It smelled of stale beer and cheap tobacco. Her trembling finger punched the digits, smearing a mixture of rainwater and blood across the metal keypad. It rang once, twice. "Speak!" The voice on the other end was a low, flat baritone. No greeting, no inflection, just a command. Maya squeezed her eyes shut. A single tear broke free, tracking through the dirt on her dark cheek. "Gabriel." Silence. The line went so completely dead, she thought he had hung up. Then the ambient background noise on his end. The faint clink of glass, the murmur of a crowded room was abruptly snuffed out, replaced by the hollow quiet of a private space. Maya. His pronunciation of her name was precise, almost clinical. But beneath the syllables there was a sudden heavy shift in gravity. "You are calling the emergency line. Her voice broke. She swallowed hard, tasting blood again. "I messed up. The dockyard deal. It was a setup. They found out I was pulling ledgers, Gabriel. They shot Ricky. They're looking for me." "Are you hit?" "I don't think so. I'm bleeding, but I fell. I ran." She pressed her forehead against the cold metal of the phone housing. Her wet hair, tight, heavy coils, clung to her neck like ice. "I have nowhere to go." "Where are you?" "Corner of 8th and Pike, by the old Romero bodega. Stay off the street. Get back in the shadows. Look at nothing but the pavement." "Gabriel, they're in a silver sedan. 10 minutes?" The line clicked. He was gone. Maya slowly hung up the receiver. The dial tone hummed a mocking tune. She slid down the side of the booth, her knees pulling up to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible. The cold was setting in deeply now, turning her shivering into violent tremors. She wrapped her arms around her legs, staring out at the rain-lashed asphalt. Every passing pair of headlights sent a spike of pure terror through her chest. A rusted pickup truck rolled by. A taxi splashed through a puddle. 10 minutes felt like a decade. She kept her eyes glued to the pavement, just as he had instructed, watching the oil slicks swirl in the puddles. She shouldn't have called him. Gabriel Park wasn't a savior. He was a shark. He ran the Eastern Seaboard's underground gambling and logistics syndicate with a calculated, bloodless efficiency that terrified the city's older, louder crime families. He didn't do favors. He didn't harbor strays. The fact that she used to audit his shell companies and that they had shared 3 quiet, unspoken months of looking at each other too long in his office didn't change what he was. 8 minutes passed. A low rumble began to build beneath her feet. It wasn't the erratic sputter of street traffic. It was a synchronized, heavy thrum. Deep V8 engines. Maya raised her head. Cutting through the downpour, a procession of headlights blinded her. They didn't just drive down the street, they claimed it. 10 identical matte black SUVs rolled onto 8th and Pike. They moved with military precision tires, hissing against the wet asphalt. 2 SUVs blocked the northern intersection. 2 blocked the south. The remaining 6 formed a tight, impenetrable steel wall around the bodega and the payphone. The street went dead quiet, save for the rain and the purr of high-end engines. The rear door of the center vehicle swung open. A black umbrella bloomed into the night. Beneath it stepped a man in a bespoke charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the ambient light. Gabriel. His face was a mask of cold porcelain. His jaw set, his dark eyes sweeping the perimeter, before locking onto the crumpled figure by the phone booth. He didn't run. He walked with a terrifying, measured calm. 2 men stepped out of the adjacent vehicle's hands, resting casually inside their tailored jackets, their eyes scanning the rooftops and alleyways. Gabriel stopped in front of the booth. He looked down at her. Maya looked up, her vision blurring from the rain and the swelling cut above her eye. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply tilted the umbrella forward, shielding her from the downpour, and looked at the blood on her face. A muscle in his jaw feathered. "Get up," he said quietly. Maya tried. She pushed against the metal siding, her legs trembling, but her missing heel threw off her balance. Her knee buckled. Before she could hit the concrete, Gabriel dropped the umbrella. He caught her by the waist, his arm a band of iron, hauling her flush against his chest. The smell of cedar rain and cold steel washed over her. He didn't say a word as he adjusted his grip, practically lifting her off the ground, and carried her toward the open door of the SUV. The interior of the vehicle was a sensory shock. It was warm, completely silent, and smelled of expensive leather. Gabriel deposited her onto the rear bench seat before sliding in beside her. The heavy door slammed shut instantly, severing the roar of the storm outside. The bulletproof glass muted the world into a silent film. "Drive," Gabriel ordered. The driver, a broad-shouldered man named Roman, didn't confirm. He simply put the car in gear. The convoy moved as one, a massive black leviathan, slipping back into the city's arteries. Maya leaned her head against the headrest, staring blankly at the suede roof. The adrenaline was draining out of her fast, leaving behind a profound, aching hollow. She felt hyper-aware of how much space she was taking up, of the dirty rainwater soaking into Gabriel's pristine leather seats, of the mud smeared on the cuffs of her jeans. Gabriel sat beside her, an imposing statue. He reached into a hidden compartment between the seats, extracting a clean white microfiber towel. He tossed it onto her lap. "Dry your hair," he said, staring straight ahead at the partition. "You're ruining the upholstery." It was a callous thing to say, but Maya heard the undercurrent. It was a grounding demand, something small and physical to anchor her back to reality. She picked up the towel, her fingers clumsy, and began pressing it against her dripping coils. "Who?" Gabriel asked, still not looking at her. "The Petrovs," Maya croaked. Her throat felt full of sand. "I was auditing the waterfront warehouses, just routine like you taught me before I quit. I noticed a discrepancy in the manifest. 2 shipping containers logged as machine parts. I went down to verify. Ricky the foreman let me in." She took a ragged breath. It wasn't machine parts. It was weapons, crates of them. And before we could close the doors, A silver sedan rolled up. Gabriel's expression remained perfectly neutral, but the temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. They saw you. They shot Ricky in the chest. I ran, squeezed through a ventilation gap in the back of the corrugated wall. They chased me for 6 blocks. You shouldn't have been there. It was my job, Gabriel. I work for the Port Authority now. I thought I was free of this life. Gabriel finally turned his head. His dark eyes locked onto hers, stripping away the remaining layers of her defenses. You are never free of this life, Maya. You merely changed the letterhead on your paycheck. She flinched, not from his tone, but from the brutal honesty of it. She dropped the towel into her lap, looking down at her scraped, bleeding knuckles. I know. The convoy drove for another 20 minutes. They didn't head toward the upscale downtown districts, where Gabriel kept his public-facing penthouse. They drove higher up into the hills, overlooking the bay, toward a fortified estate, hidden behind a thick perimeter of old-growth trees and 10-foot concrete walls. The iron gates parted seamlessly as the lead SUV approached. They pulled into a massive subterranean garage brightly lit and pristine housing a dozen high-end luxury vehicles. The convoy fanned out parking with practiced precision. Come, Gabriel said, stepping out of the vehicle. Maya followed her bare heel, slapping against the polished epoxy floor. Roman fell into step 3 paces behind them, his eyes scanning the empty, secure garage as if an assassin might drop from the fluorescent lights. They entered a private elevator. Gabriel keyed in a code and pressed a thumb to a biometric scanner. The car shot upward in total silence. Maya gripped the handrail, suddenly dizzy. The blood loss, the cold, and the exhaustion were staging a coup in her nervous system. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a massive, open-plan living space. It was minimalist to a fault. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping, panoramic view of the storm-battered city below. But inside, everything was slate dark wood and stark white furniture. It felt less like a home and more like a high-altitude bunker. Sit, Gabriel said, pointing to a grey linen armchair near the kitchen island. Maya obeyed, sinking into the cushions. She felt utterly out of place. A bruised, muddy street rat in a museum of modern wealth. Gabriel shed his suit jacket, tossing it carelessly over the back of a bar stool. He rolled up the crisp white sleeves of his dress shirt, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle and a faded scar running jagged along his left wrist. He walked to a sleek cabinet, pulled out a white first aid box and returned to her. He pulled up a stool, sitting directly in front of her. Their knees almost touched. Look at me, he commanded softly. Maya lifted her chin. Gabriel opened the kit, pulling out a sterile wipe. He leaned in. The scent of him, clean and sharp, was intoxicatingly familiar. It brought back a rush of memories she had spent 2 years burying. Late nights auditing ledgers while he poured bourbon. The silent, heavy glances over mahogany desks. The night she left, sliding a resignation letter under his door because the tension between them was going to burn her alive if she stayed. He pressed the antiseptic wipe to the gash above her eyebrow. Maya hissed, flinching backward. Gabriel's left hand shot out, cupping the back of her head. His fingers tangled in the damp coils of her hair, holding her firmly in place. It wasn't a gentle grip, but it wasn't painful either. It was absolute control. Hold still, he murmured, his face inches from hers. He worked methodically, cleaning the dirt and dried blood from her skin. His touch was clinical, yet his thumb rested against the line of her jaw, stroking the skin with a subconscious, rhythmic motion. Maya stared at his chest, watching the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "Why did you call me?" he asked quietly, applying a butterfly bandage to the cut. "I told you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I had nowhere else to go." Gabriel dropped his hands. He tossed the bloody wipe onto the counter. He looked down at her, his eyes dark, unreadable voids. "You ran from me 2 years ago because you said my world was too dark for you." Gabriel said, his voice dropping an octave, settling into a dangerous, gravelly register. "You called me a monster in a tailored suit. You said you wanted the light. Maya swallowed, unable to break his gaze. Gabriel leaned closer, his voice a lethal caress. And yet the moment the light burns you, you run straight back into the dark. He stood up, towering over her, his broad shoulders blocking out the city lights from the window behind him. Roman Gabriel called out without turning his head. The enforcer stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. Yes, boss? Get the men ready. Find the silver sedan. Gabriel looked down at Maya, his expression hardening into something completely devoid of mercy. The Petrovs think they can hunt what is mine. They are about to learn what a true predator looks like. Maya's breath caught in her throat. What is mine? Gabriel turned on his heel and walked toward the armory, the heavy vault door echoing through the silent penthouse. The heavy steel of the armory door hissed shut, its mechanical lock engaging with a thud that vibrated through the floorboards. Maya was left alone in the cavernous living room. The silence of the penthouse was immediate and suffocating, a vacuum sealing her away from the chaos of the city below. She stood slowly. Her bare foot protested against the cold hardwood, the bruised heel throbbing in time with her pulse. She needed to wash off the smell of the alley. She needed to wash off the phantom scent of Ricky's blood. She found the guest bathroom down the east hall. It was exactly what she expected of Gabriel's slate tiles, a massive rainfall showerhead, and completely devoid of personal touches. No extra toothbrushes, no stray bottles of cologne, just sterile, expensive function. Maya stripped off the damp, ruined canvas jacket, letting it drop to the floor. Her t-shirt clung to her ribs, stained a rusty brown at the hem. She kicked off her remaining shoe and turned the shower dial all the way up. The water hit the slate with a deafening hiss. She stepped under the scalding spray fully clothed, letting the heat shock her nervous system back into alignment. Her skin turned a dull, aching pink. The water pooled brown and red at the drain, swirling around her toes before spiraling away into the dark. She pressed her palms against the slick wall, bowing her head. She had called him. For 2 years, she had built a quiet, meticulously boring life. She audited municipal manifests. She bought cheap coffee at the corner store. She dated a middle school teacher for exactly 3 weeks before the profound, mind-numbing lack of danger made her break it off. She had run from Gabriel Park because he terrified her, not because he was violent, but because he made violence make sense. He organized it. He budgeted for it. Now she had pointed him like a loaded gun at the men who chased her. Across the city, the storm finally began to break. The torrential downpour faded into a miserable, freezing drizzle that fell like ash over the industrial district. The silver sedan was parked outside a defunct meatpacking plant near the North Rail Yard. It was a sloppy hideout. Predictable. Gabriel didn't send a scout. He didn't establish a perimeter. He simply brought the hammer down. 4 black SUVs breached the rusted chain-link gates simultaneously. The heavy vehicles didn't stop until they rammed the sedan, crushing its chassis against the brick loading dock in a symphony of screeching metal and shattering glass. Gabriel stepped out of his vehicle. The tailored charcoal suit was gone, replaced by a dark tactical jacket. He held a suppressed Heckler & Koch USP. He didn't run. He walked toward the warehouse entrance with that same terrifying, measured stride. 3 men poured out of the loading bay doors, shouting in Russian, raising automatic weapons. Roman and the strike team cut them down before Gabriel even had to lift his arm. The suppressed gunfire sounded like heavy staple guns punching into wet wood. Bodies hit the wet concrete. The metallic tang of fresh blood instantly overpowered the smell of wet garbage and rusted iron. Gabriel stepped over a twitching leg and walked into the warehouse. It smelled of ammonia, cheap cigars, and panic. 2 men were left inside, huddled behind a stack of splintered wooden pallets. One was clutching a radio, screaming frantically for backup. The other fired blindly toward the doorway. A stray bullet shattered a hanging fluorescent bulb overhead, showering Gabriel's shoulders in a fine dusting of glass. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He signaled Roman with 2 fingers. The enforcer flanked right, moving through the shadows of the machinery like a ghost. 3 seconds later, a wet, heavy crunch echoed through the cavernous room, followed by a gargled scream that was cut abruptly short. Gabriel walked forward. The remaining man, the one with the radio, dropped the device and threw his hands up. He was young, barely out of his teens. His eyes were wide, darting from Gabriel's impassive face to the fresh corpse of his partner, bleeding out behind the pallets. Wait, the boy stammered in broken English, his chest heaving. I just drive the car. Gabriel stopped 3 feet away. He looked down at the boy's sneakers. Muddy. The exact same grey, oil-slicked mud from the alley behind the Ramiro bodega. You drove the car, Gabriel repeated. His voice was entirely devoid of malice. It wasn't angry. It was just a statement of fact. Yes, my boss, he shoot the guy at the docks. Not me. I just drive. Please. Gabriel raised the pistol. He didn't aim for the head. He aimed for the center of mass. Then you drove to the wrong alley. 2 muffled shots. The boy slumped against the pallet, sliding to the floor, leaving a thick red smear against the wood. Gabriel didn't check the pulse. He turned his back on the body, ejecting the spent magazine. He caught it in his palm, sliding a fresh one into the grip with a sharp click. Burn the sedan, Gabriel told Roman as he walked back out into the freezing night air. Take the ledgers from their back office. Leave the bodies where they fell. I want Petrov to know exactly who balanced his books tonight. Maya was sitting on the edge of the massive unmade bed in the master suite when the front door of the penthouse finally opened. The digital clock on the nightstand glared a harsh red, 3:14 a.m. She had shed her wet clothes, wrapping herself in a thick, dark grey bathrobe she found in his closet. It was far too large, pooling around her knees, but it smelled faintly of cedar and expensive laundry detergent. She stood up, pulling the fabric belt tight across her waist, and walked barefoot out into the main living area. Gabriel was standing in the kitchen. He had stripped off the tactical jacket, tossing it carelessly onto a pristine white sofa. His black t-shirt clung to his torso, damp with sweat and rain. He was pouring a neat glass of bourbon from a crystal decanter. His knuckles were bruised, the skin split over the joints and smeared with a thin film of dried blood. Maya stopped at the edge of the marble kitchen island. She looked at his hands, then slowly dragged her gaze up to his face. The porcelain mask was gone. He looked exhausted, the sharp angles of his jaw tight, his eyes hollowed out by the sheer output of adrenaline. He didn't look like a glamorous kingpin. He looked like a man who had just finished slaughtering animals. He didn't say a word. He just slid the heavy glass across the marble counter toward her. She took it. The amber liquid burned beautifully down her throat, cutting through the lingering chill in her bones and settling in her stomach like a hot coal. The men in the sedan won't follow you again, Gabriel said quietly. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. Their boss will find them in the morning. He will look at the angle of the bullet wounds, he will look at the ash of his vehicle, and he will realize that chasing a port auditor is no longer a profitable venture. Maya gripped the glass tightly, staring at the remaining liquid. You killed them. Yes. It wasn't a brag. It was an accounting error corrected. A line item struck from the ledger. You didn't have to go yourself, Maya said. Her voice was steady, the sound of it surprising her in the vast, quiet room. You have 50 men who could have done it. Roman could have handled a street-level crew. Gabriel looked up. His dark eyes caught the dim, ambient light of the city bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He pushed off the counter, closing the distance between them. He didn't stop until he was standing on the other side of the island, leaning over the marble. The scent of him had changed. The rain was gone. Now it was cordite sweat and copper. I don't outsource what belongs to me, he said. Maya's breath hitched. She looked up at him, her chest tightening. I left 2 years ago, Gabriel. I slid my resignation under your door. I walked away from the syndicates. You changed your zip code. He corrected his voice, a low, rough murmur. He reached across the marble. His bloodied hand hovered over her cheek for a fraction of a second before his knuckles grazed her skin. You changed your clothes. You didn't change who you are. You see the world in ledgers, Maya, in debts, assets, and liabilities. You knew exactly what the cost would be when you put that quarter in the slot tonight. She closed her eyes, leaning infinitesimally into his touch. She hated that he was right. She hated that the raw terror of the alley had vanished the exact second his black SUVs had boxed her in. She hadn't felt fear when he arrived. She had felt an overwhelming, toxic relief. It was a heavy toll, she whispered. It was past due. Gabriel stepped around the island. His hand slid back his long fingers, burying into the thick, damp coils of her hair at the nape of her neck. He tilted her head up. There was no gentleness in his expression, only a fierce, possessive gravity that anchored her to the floor. There is no more pretending, he said, his breath warm against her lips. No more municipal jobs. No more cheap apartments hiding in plain sight. You audited my life, Maya. You saw the rot in the floorboards, you counted the blood money, and you still called me when the wolves came. And if the wolves come for you? She asked, her pulse beating violently against her throat. A dark, sharp smile touched the corner of Gabriel's mouth. It didn't reach his eyes. Then you will balance the books, as you always do. He didn't wait for her permission. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, cinematic reunion. It was a collision, hard, desperate, and tasting of cheap bourbon and violence. Maya dropped the glass. It shattered against the hardwood floor, the sound sharp and final in the quiet penthouse. But neither of them flinched. She grabbed his shoulders, her fingers digging into the hard muscle beneath his shirt, anchoring herself to the only thing in the city that felt real. She had run from the dark for 2 years, desperate to be clean, only to realize the light had never kept her warm. She was exactly where she belonged. Standing in the center of the storm, perfectly safe in the arms of the monster who brought it. Did this intense, gritty Mafia romance keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved watching Gabriel and Maya's dark, explosive reunion, hit that like button right now. Tell me in the comments if you want more stories diving into the ruthless underworld of Gabriel Park. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow romance readers and hit subscribe to the channel so you never miss another thrilling chapter. Stay tuned for more dark romance.